everyone, this is Pepper Pace. I'm here today to do a reading. I have written over 50 interracial books, and there are a lot of books for me to read. So the first one we're going to start with is Wheels of Steel. Now, Wheels of Steel is a story about a young man. He's 19 years old. He's independent, but he has cerebral palsy. He lives alone, but he needs an aide. He needs more than one aide, actually. There's just not one description of cerebral palsy. And in his, he is, he has to use a wheelchair. He has limited ability to control his muscles. So he has spasticity, where his muscles will pull, he'll jerk, he can't control his head motions, and therefore he doesn't have good control of his speech. He slurs. Sometimes it's hard for people to understand. It's hard for him to eat. So that's why he has to have an aide, because even though he's very independent, someone has to be there. He also has seizures. So when he has his seizures, of course, he's going to black out. But he is a college student, and he wants to live an independent life. But one thing about Jason, and he is, I would call him a prodigy. He is a musical genius when it comes to making beats, creating electronic sounds. So he is a DJ, and he's in a group called Wheels of Steel. But Jason is angry because as a child, he never was around other people other than his mom and his aides, or his assistants or caregivers. And a lot of them were abusive to him, and so he grew not to trust assistants. So that brings us to Robin. And Robin is an African American woman. She is very, very shy. And while people have disabilities, a lot of times that you can see, you would not be able to see hers per se, because hers is anxiety. So she can't. She has a hard time being around crowds. She has a mother who wants her to do better for herself, but she doesn't feel like she can go out and do more, like going to college. She can't stand the idea of crowds, but more than that, she also has a learning disability where when she was in school, it was just difficult. She had dyslexia, so it was very difficult for her to be successful in school. So she has grown up thinking that she wasn't as smart as other people, and that has created a crippling shyness. But she is in a situation where she needs the money. So she has to decide, I'm going to go out and try another career. I'm not going to college, even though my mom wants me to go to college. I'm going to try another career. And she decides to try being a caregiver. She feels like she can work her restaurant job and take care of somebody in need at night, and not have to really interact too much with people. But this company that she works for, and she's only been there a month, but she already found that this company, Pinnacle, they are really shady. And so they trick their employees into doing things that their employees wouldn't want to do. They wouldn't quite lie, but they leave out a lot of information. So in this part that I'm going to read to you, Robin has been working with an older woman, and the older woman got very ill. And so they said, well, hey, you can work with this kid who has cerebral palsy, just a little bit of light lifting, and, take him to school. And then, when he's out of school, that's your day. You're done. So she's like, I know they're not telling me something, but I need the money. And they really made it very sweet by adding extra money for wear and tear on her car, which is her precious car. So anyway, we're going to start with book 1, Wheels of Steel, when Robin meets Jason. So As I do my reading, I'm going to be stopping periodically to take a drink of water because my voice is very hoarse, I found. And um, this is not an audiobook, so it's not going to be perfect like an audiobook. Wheels of Steel, Book 1, Chapter 6. The next morning, Robin stretched in her bed, reveling at the feel of luxuriating there. She showered, and keeping in mind that she would have to do some lifting, put on jeans, a sweatshirt, and tennis shoes. She then brushed back her wild hair, pulling it tight into a ponytail at the top of her head, the ends springing out wildly. She hurried to her car, a cup of coffee in her hands. It would be nice taking some kid to school. Then she could get caught up on her grocery shopping. She wondered if he had a pager or something. She checked the address as she pulled up into a parking lot of a nice condo. It was just a little before 7 as she hurried up the walkway and rang the doorbell. A man in a wheelchair opened the door, and the smile that she had plastered on her face dropped. Man, not kid. He stared at her. His head bobbed a bit on his neck. Unruly red hair flopped into his eyes that were cold and unfriendly as they appraised her. Thanks for fitting me into your busy schedule. His voice was as cold as his eyes, slurring enough that she had to strain to understand him. His mouth twisted and he gulped in a breath. So happy that you could make it, even if you're 24 hours late and I had to miss a day of classes. He rolled his chair back into the apartment in stiff, angry movements, and Robin stepped inside uncertainly. I'm not sure if I understand you. I just got this call last night about this job. Well, Pinnacle is so fucked up. He wheeled around, coming toward her. She almost took a step back. His pale skin was mottled red from anger and was covered in millions of freckles. Although he obviously had some muscle control issues, he had no problem pointing his finger at her accusingly. They got paid a week ago, promising that it would be no problem getting me an aide. Then you cancel at the last minute, leaving me in a lurch. The last slurred words were shouted in a spray of spit. Robin was not to be easily angered, but his rudeness pushed her into that direction. How dare this asshole shout and spit all over her? Angrily, she wiped his spit spray from the back of her hand. Well, first of all, I had nothing to do with the deal you had with Pinnacle. Like I told you, I accepted a job just last night. She began to shake with anger, but her voice stayed steady. It couldn't have been me to cancel out because before that I was watching a little old lady that just went into the hospital with pneumonia, so don't you yell at me. She put her fist on her hips as the man in the wheelchair quieted. He watched her silently. I'm sorry then. I thought it was you. Now that his anger was no longer directed at her, his head didn't flop and lurch around as much, and his voice became clear and quite easy to understand. His breathing slowed as he continued watching her. What's your name? He'd switched gears so fast that she didn't know how to respond. She was still ready to chew his ass, and now he was speaking calmly. I'm Robin Mathena. I'm Jason, but I guess you know that. Actually, she hadn't. All she had was his sex and his address. She didn't admit that, though. He was her age, so if he was going to school, then it meant college. Shit. What can I do to help you, Jason? I can use help getting breakfast. Follow me into the kitchen, he demanded. He didn't seem mad at her any longer, but that didn't mean that he was being nice. She followed him from a large living room that contained one couch, an armchair next to a side table and lamp, and all kinds of electronic equipment. She could tell that it was a nice apartment containing expensive things, but it wasn't set up like a person's home. It seemed more like a studio. The kitchen had a big butcher's block table, very nice, but it wasn't what one would consider homey. There was a commercial feel to it, as if this room should be in an exclusive restaurant. He opened a lower cabinet and retrieved a bowl and spoon. I need you to make coffee, please. He moved to the fridge next and retrieved milk, which he placed in his lap. He had the type of wheelchair that required him to actually wheel himself. He then went to a pantry where he retrieved a box of Cheerios. Instead of a coffee pot, he had a coffee press. She studied it while chewing her lip. She had no idea how to use it. Forget about the coffee, he said, noticing her confusion. We don't have time to fool with it anyways. She put the contraption down and moved to the table, reaching for the cereal. He snatched it and glared at her. I can do it. Okay. What was he, 4? She stood back and waited for him to tell her what he needed. He spilled Cheerios on the table as he poured them into a bowl, but she was not going to offer to clean it up and risk getting yelled at again. He carefully poured the milk, not spilling any. It obviously took a lot of work because his tongue peeked through as he concentrated on his task. She smiled. He looked like a kid that was working out a puzzle, a cute little ginger kid with wild, crazy red hair. He glanced up at her and caught her smile. He scowled. Please put this away from me, Robin, he said in a neutral voice. His words were slightly slurred, but she could still hear the dislike in it. It was on the tip of her tongue to tell him that she was not his maid. He had gotten it out of the fridge and with no problem, so she was sure that he could return it. But it was also $18.50 an hour, and well, for now, he was the boss. She returned the milk and then put away the cereal. A newspaper was on the table, and for a moment he ignored her as he read and ate, scooping cereal into the gaping hole that was his mouth, and not doing a good job of keeping it all inside. She looked at anything other than him eating. Have you ever worked with anyone with cerebral palsy? She looked at him quickly. He was still holding the paper, but now watching her. No. Have you ever known anyone with CP? No. Figures, he murmured. First, let me explain that there is not just one symptom associated with my disorder. Even though I slur my words and have less muscle control, doesn't mean that I'm mentally disabled. Please don't make the mistake of thinking that I am. I'm probably more intelligent than you. You are certainly more rude, she glared at him. It's not my intent, he said calmly, just making sure that you understand. Food falls out of my mouth not because I have no table manners, but because I have little muscle control. She guiltily bit back the sarcastic response that she had prepared. When I eat, I sometimes choke. You do know how to give the Heimlich maneuver, right? She nodded. Okay, he sighed. So I need you to watch me eat. He gave her an icy look. Hope it doesn't disgust you much. Her face warmed. They had started out on a bad note. She decided to be the bigger man and set things right. Jason, I apologize for calling you rude. She blew out a tense breath. I won't judge you if you stop judging me. His eyes flinched. He turned back to his cereal. Fine, he said between bites of food. When he was done eating, he placed the dishes into the sink, then wheeled out of the room. I need a shave, but there's no time for that. I need you to pee me. Her heart jumped in her chest. Pee him? What in the hell did that mean? How do I do that? She followed him into a large bathroom. You need to hold my penis while I piss. Oh my God, this was a nightmare. She'd never been around a penis before. Her face was hot and sweat sprouted from her armpits and dotted her forehead. You were holding that spoon just fine, Jason. I'm just messing with you, Robin. I can hold my own penis just fine. He gave her a long look, and she almost fainted from relief. He smirked. Have you ever been an aide for a male before? She wanted to kick him in his smirking face. Don't worry about me, she snapped. I'm a fast learner. She tried to hide her displeasure that he had known just what to say to cause her to shake in her shoes. He stopped the chair as close to the toilet as he could get. I only need to use the bathroom 3 times a day. My body has been, I guess you would say, trained to go once in the morning, once in the afternoon, and then before bed. But I can't use my legs much. If you can help me to stand, then I can take care of the rest myself." Robin squeezed past the wheelchair and got in front of him. "How do we do this?" "Lean forward, bending at the knees. Use your legs, not your back. I'm going to put my arms around your shoulders. Your arms go around my body, under my arms. Pull until my legs are locked beneath me. I'm wearing braces, so once I'm standing, I'm okay." She leaned forward, and Jason's eyes stayed glued to her lighter ones before his arms went around her. His long red hair was in her face. It ran down in unruly curls over his shoulders. It was beautiful hair. He was a ginger, red hair, green eyes, freckles dotting pale skin. Too bad he was such an asshole. She might have thought he was cute. She began to lift. "Don't use your back," he said, lips very close to her ear. She paused and then used her legs to lift. "There you go." She was hugging him. He was hugging her, and the timbre of his words vibrated through her body, creating goosebumps that ran down her spine. She had never been so close to a man that was not directly a part of her bloodline. Beneath his loose-fitting shirt, his muscles were tight and toned. Her mouth felt suddenly dry as she nervously took a step away from him. Standing, he towered over her. She had to look up at him. He was looking down, but not at her, at his legs. She looked down as well. They seemed to be supporting him okay. She backed up again, bumping the toilet, and he placed one hand on the sink counter while the other remained on her shoulder for balance. She gave him a surprised look. "Can you walk?" And then she blushed. What a stupid thing to ask a person in a wheelchair. "A little." He swung his left leg out, and she stepped out of the way, still remaining close enough so that he could continue to hold on to her for support. He leaned his body to the left and then swung his right leg out. "You're walking." He wobbled a little, but righted himself. "Jason, if you can do that, then why don't you get a walker or crutches?" His expression grew dark, and he didn't answer. Shit. She put her foot in her mouth. He had reached the toilet. Now what was she supposed to do? "Lift the toilet seat," he said while he moved to undo his pants. She did it quickly. He wasn't holding on to her for balance, but he wasn't wobbling either. "Bring my chair behind me so that I can sit when I'm done." She did as he demanded, wishing that he could be a little nicer. As she moved to get his chair, she heard the loud patter of his urine stream hitting the water within the toilet. She blushed. Well, there was no shame in his game. After urinating for an ungodly long time, he checked behind him for his chair, and then using the cabinet, he lowered himself into the chair, flopping down into it. He picked up his left leg and then his right, setting his feet into position. She watched as he reached forward and flushed the toilet, then wheeled himself to a pedestal sink where he washed his hands. He sighed and looked at her. "Well, we'll be late, but I guess that can't be helped. Wheel me out to the living room so that I can get my things." "I got here at 7 o'clock on the dot," she said, unwilling to take the blame for his tardiness to school. "You were supposed to be here at 6 a.m., she sighed. "Well, I won't be late again." He didn't speak, and she silently cursed Ben for making her look stupid for this job. He instructed her to get his book bag out of the closet while he went to his computer and unplugged something from the modem. He pocketed whatever the thing was and then rode to the door waiting for her to open it. At her car, she helped him to stand again. It took a while, but she got him folded into the small car while he looked at her like she was an idiot for not having a minivan. After opening the trunk, she tackled the chair. It was lightweight but still big and awkward, and because she'd never done anything like this, it seemed to take forever. Jason had eventually bellowed that there were latches that would need to be undone. She found them and lifted the suddenly collapsible chair. Something metal scraped against her bumper, and she cursed. It left a mark. Now she was really in a foul mood. Rude client, been lying about the job, and now her car had a scratch. Robin climbed behind the wheel, refusing to look at Jason. Where to? He pulled out a cell phone and checked the time before answering. Head to the main campus. I'll direct you from there. Which main campus? UC. He raised a surprised brow that she didn't know. He put on headphones and proceeded to ignore her for most of the ride. Robin was not particularly happy to navigate through the congested early morning traffic as Jason directed her through the maze of buildings. She would have to draw a map in order to find him again. He directed her to a parking spot, scowling again because she didn't have a handicap sign. Silently, she retrieved the bulky wheelchair from the trunk. Jason had already unbuckled himself and had his feet positioned on the ground. He stood, without her assistance, using the door to steady himself. She came around to the side of him with the chair, and he turned his body again and flopped down into it. Okay, you can take it from here, right? She asked, already counting down the seconds when she could be done with him for a while. He eyed her. I can wheel you inside if you want. God, he sighed in exasperation. You aren't dropping me off. You'll be spending the day with me. She frowned at him in disbelief. I thought, what? That you just drop me off and go off somewhere and do your own thing and still get paid? No, you are my aide for the entire shift. Her heart dropped as she glanced nervously at the other students moving about. She did not want to be here. More, she did not want to be here with this asshole. Swallowing back her disappointment and trying not to become anxious, Robin wheeled him to the entrance of the building. Jason suddenly stopped the chair by gripping the wheels. He turned his head to look at her. He had a frown on his face, and his muscles jerked so much that it caused his unkempt hair to flop around him. You do know why I need an aide, right? Robin did not want to answer that question and appear even more clueless than she already felt. Yet she did need the answer to that simple question. No one explained. Damn it. He turned back in his seat, straining to look at her. I don't have time for this, he said. He was back to being annoyed, which made his speech even more slurred and hard to understand, and his movements even more jerky and spastic. She wanted to roll her eyes and was on the verge of telling him to just shove it. He was digging in his pocket for his cell phone. I have seizures, about 2 a day, maybe less, maybe more. I need you to help me with my seizures, help me with my books and my laptop. I can do pretty much everything on my own, but if I have a seizure, then I do need someone with me. Mind coming around in front of me so I don't have to crane my neck looking at you? Robin moved from behind his chair to stand in front of him. People looked at them curiously. He was jabbing at his phone. The duration of a seizure is anywhere from 1 minute to 3. They don't hurt me, but sometimes I'm tired afterwards. Hello? I need to speak to the manager in charge. This is Jason Hamilton. He ignored her momentarily as he focused on his call. She felt stupid, just standing there as people moved around them. UC was a huge campus, and a guy with cerebral palsy in a wheelchair and a black girl standing in front of him, looking like a kid about to be punished by her parent. It just garnered a lot of attention. Who am I speaking to? Mary Louise? This is Jason Hamilton. Jason, he said distinctly, obviously attempting to control his enunciation. He talked as if his tongue was half a second behind the movement of the rest of his mouth. Yeah, I'm not doing very well at all, Mary Louise. Pinnacle lied to me. Robin's eyes widened. She listened intently to the one-sided conversation. First, you took my money, promising that you could do all of the things I asked. He stuttered a bit, face turning red. He suddenly sucked in a deep breath and closed his eyes, seeming to gain a bit more control of the movements of his neck and the jerking of his head and facial muscles. Oh yes, it was a lie. You didn't have an assistant lined up for me. You threw this inexperienced girl into the job, probably lying to her the same that you lied to me. His eyes flashed. Mary Louise, don't patronize me. I've already missed a week and 1 day of school. I'm late today, and it's all Pinnacle's fault. You will be crediting me for the loss of my time." He sighed. "The only thing I want to hear from you is, 'Yes, Mr. Hamilton.'" He snorted. "Then I'll just stay with the state, or I'll just keep looking elsewhere." Jason suddenly looked at Robin. "Fine. That's acceptable. Robin needs a course in seizure emergencies if she's going to assist me." Robin tried not to stare, but couldn't help it now that the conversation had turned to her. "As soon as possible, or she's no good to me. Because I can get the access bus to drive me around, but I need someone who knows how to handle seizure emergencies." He listened quietly. "That's not good enough." "No. I need you to tell me something today. Find out today and call me back this evening. Let me make sure we understand each other. You are crediting me for 2 full days, today and yesterday. You're providing Robin with training in a certified seizure emergency course. No, that's not good enough. Oh my God, you should know this. Contact the Epilepsy Foundation or the National Institute of Neurological Disorders, and they will tell you exactly where." He winked at her suddenly, and she almost jumped. A slow smile crossed his lips. "Thank you, Mary Louise. I don't mean to be an ass, but this is a job for others. For me, this is my life." He disconnected the call and replaced the phone into his pocket. He gave her an intent look. "Okay, so I guess your boss will be contacting you to set up training." She nodded, stunned. He had handled himself so well, better than she ever had with Pinnacle. And he made a good point. Obviously, he had every right to be aggravated, because to her, this was a job that she'd leave behind at the end of the day. But this was his life.